Okay. All right, welcome everyone. This is obviously the session here in the Global Educational Forum. My name is Gregory Unruh. I'm the Arison Professor at George Mason University. I'm also the Sustainability Guest Editor at the MIT Sloan Management Review. And the topic of this panel is ethics and ethical implications in AI. We've seen in the plenary sessions quite a bit of discussion about ethics. Carme Antillas from the AI Advisory Commission of the UN highlighted that the questions we need to face are not only political, legal, and policy, but also moral. Moral questions are questions of right or wrong, good or bad, and those are the considerations we're charged with here. We also found out from George Siemens that the academia is doing a poor job. The number one deficit in academic research is the ethical implications of AI. So we're talking about a very, very important topic today. I have an interesting sort of background, and I'll share quickly around AI technology and education. In 2002, I was asked to revamp our digital literacy course for our undergraduate students, for the 20-year-old students. And so we were designing a course that could teach students to use digital technologies to advance their personal and professional goals, use technology and not be used by technology. And in November of that year, in the middle of the class, ChatGPT was launched. And so as a professor of the class on digital literacy, I logged in, got my account, and typed in, the first thing I ever typed in is, how should I teach ChatGPT to my students? And within seconds, I got a very well reasoned out lesson plan. And with just a couple of touches of the keyboard, I recognized immediately the vast potential that artificial intelligence and large language models could bring to education, and then all the vast potential challenges, ethical and otherwise, that it can bring. So that's what we'll tap into here today, and we have a series of very qualified and expert panelists to discuss this area that we're still discovering. Some ethical concerns we are aware of, many we're not aware of. So what I would like to ask is we'll go around the panel here, ask each of you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, and then just select one ethical issue that you think the participants of this forum should be considering and being perhaps thinking about responses or solutions to. So please.
Hello everyone. Hello everyone over there. So my name is Justo Hidalgo. I'm the Chief AI Officer at Adigital. Adigital is the Spanish Association of the Digital Economy. So we comprise around a bit more than 500 companies that go from the small digital marketing outlet with 2 people to the big tech, corporates, startups, and scale-ups. My role in the association is a new role. Is I think today, a year since we started, is to lead a team that work along the member companies around the complexities of AI. So this association went from pure public policy to, let's say, opening the umbrella and trying to help companies understand AI and in general emerging technologies in a much deeper way. While performing public policy, of course, and continuing with the things that an association like that typically do. My background is technical, so I don't come from public policy. I have a PhD in computer science, so that's basically what I bring to the table in the association with the rest of the expert team in public policy regulation and the lab and the thing, and also some startups that I founded around the data world. So just trying to answer your question, I believe that and what we're trying to do, not just our talk, but walk the talk. Anything that we talk, when we think about ethical principles, when we think about sustainability, when we think about algorithmic justice or equity, nothing can happen without transparency and explainability of the systems. And I believe we are still in this moment where we need to work with companies, work with regulators to fully understand what transparency and explainability means. Transparency meaning, in a very simple way, how do you document, how do you understand the own models that you are building or you are using? Because the regulation affects not only what you build, but also what you use. So you might be using a third-party AI models, and you're still have to be compliant with the regulation. And not also what you document, but also how you share it with your stakeholders, which can be your CFO, but can be your user, your customer, or the regulator, of course, or the society because you believe, or you are forced to, depending on regulation, to publish that information to the public society. And also explainability, and I think that's obvious, but we will discuss about that because models have different levels of complexity. The most complex and powerful models are at the same time difficult to understand. Typically, people say that is black box. No, they're not black box. We are the black box. If you ask an autonomous car about why it turned right instead of left, it's going to say, perfect, I'm going to give you the 250 million reasons why I chose to turn right. The problem is how we are able to turn that into the 10 or 15 key reasons why that we can understand why the car turned right. And this is, I believe, the core from which we can start building the rest of the ethical principles and in order to build the responsible AI.
Wonderful, thank you. That's very good point. If we're building intelligent models that we can understand, first of all, it's difficult for us to accept and trust their results, but also you point out very clearly, if we don't understand what they're doing, regulation is very challenging. So excellent, very great points.
All right, so I introduce myself. My name is Ahmed El-Gamal from Rutgers University. I am an AI by training. I have been doing AI for the last 30 years in computer science. And being a university professor, I also teach AI, undergrad and grad. And being in the intersection of education and doing AI research is really interesting. In the last 15 years, I switched my focus into the area of art and AI in particular. So I have a lab called the Art and AI Lab at Rutgers, which really give me the opportunity to interact with people in humanities and people in art schools. And that was an eye-opener for me to talk to these people and understand their concern and the issues they are dealing with. And that was before the current hype of AI. So now, when I hear many of the discussion, I have totally different perspectives of many of the people who are just started to think about these kind of problems. So for today's, for this panel, there are many things we can talk about. It's multifold in terms of we're talking about implication of AI in ethics. So I'll keep it open for the discussion.
Great. So just to be clear, your lab, you've been speaking with artists, and their concerns are about the rights to their creative.
Yes, a lot of discussion about the ethical aspects of using AI, the ethical aspects of training AI, issues about artist identity. There are another panel later today about art and AI. I don't want to, but many people might not be attending there, so I can also dig into this. So one of the particular issues about ethical AI in general, which I don't hear many people discussing, is the issue of identity, which for creatives is very fundamental. If you are a creator doing art or music or anything like that, and you decide to use AI in your process, obviously there is a problem of what the AI is trained on and how that's being used. But you as a creator, when you write a prompt, for example, and create an image, and you claim authorship of that, as you don't realize that somebody else might use very similar prompt and generate something different, right? And it's different not because of what you did or what you add to the system. It's just different because there's a random number generator at the back end, like flipping a coin, that give you a different outcome from that other person outcome. So now the issue of authorship, which is fundamental to many creative domain and fundamental in humanities, is problematic.
Yes.
And these start to emerge now. Once you are using AI, now it becomes a big problem, a big ethical problem.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting, since we're talking about educational context, what you just described, when a human does it, we would call it, or a student does it, we call it plagiarism. But when a machine does it, what do we call it? Anyway, we can leave that open. And I'll pass on to our next panelist.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you for coming together for this discussion. My name is Mark Caban, and my doctoral training is in behavioral and cognitive psychology and adult learning, adult development. But for the last 15 years, I've been leading an NGO for refugee youth that have been displaced by war, and then I spent 3 years as a director of an ed leadership master's program in a very innovative kind of boutique graduate school. And I was surprised on my first week on the job. I got an email that the students that are connected to our university were having a free STEM program, and I thought that's really fantastic. So I clicked on it and I saw that it was Skunk Works, which is one of the divisions of Lockheed Martin that makes a lot of their weapons. And they were not only funding this program and offering it for free, but they were actually teaching it themselves. And so I got really interested in what I did. And if you want to do this, go on Google, not now, but just do a quick search of all these arms manufacturers, Alba, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, and then put STEM in K-12 schools. And what you'll see is that they've been investing millions of dollars into these programs around the country, and not a lot of people are talking about it. When I say not a lot, it's kind of zero if you look it up online. They're just kind of articles that are written in local publications announcing this as a very good thing. I was a bit shocked by that, because if you watch the videos, it's partly indoctrination. I remember one of the first people speaking on the video from Lockheed was saying that I'm proud to make the foreign policy tools of our country. He's talking about the F-35. And so then I thought, wow, these 16-year-old kids are being groomed to being arms manufacturers. Why does this matter now? Because across the United States, there's been this uprising that's happening in 140 plus schools, where this is coming to question that should the educational missions of universities be tied up in creating weapons and making wealth off of that. And so the ethical question is going to be what's going to happen at the universities right now, and how this plays out. And if this is going to trickle down to the K-12 system, will these quote-unquote STEM AI programs going to be questioned for their ethical uses as well? Why do I care about this? I care about this because my family was displaced by a war, an imperial war. I care about this because I spent 10 years of my life working with children that have been displaced by various U.S. imperial wars, and yet at the same time, it's a topic that's seldom spoken about. In the U.S., if you even say the word empire, people look at you like you're from a different planet, like, what are you talking about? Because the United States was an anti-imperialist kind of country in its origin story. So I think I like the niche kind of topics that we have. You have a tough job ahead of you.
No.
But how to tie these together. But that's the thing that's on my mind today.
No, that's very good. And that's, one of the things you point out is that the creators of these technologies are largely corporations. Mm-hmm. And we've had the point about understanding how these technologies work. There's an asymmetry of information, right? And the creators of the technology have way more information about the technology. And they also have demands. I've worked also with Intel, and Intel has what they called originally AI for Youth, but it was a K through 12 program, and they have a whole series now of programs. Their framing is they're trying to prevent the creation of an artificial intelligence digital divide. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely correct. Do we want artificial intelligence education, STEM education, being led by corporations and their needs, or do we want it led by private colleges, or do we want it led by the public? Big questions. Sure. And the challenge there is that the people that control the knowledge about how these things work, that information is very concentrated in the creators and not well spread, which makes it a challenge for the public institutions to deal with it. So we are talking about, this is the Global Education Forum, so let's talk about this idea of global education, the role AI can play in global education. We look frequently in terms of sort of the ethical questions about sustainable development to the Sustainable Development Goals. We have one of the Sustainable Development Goals is around quality education, number 4. The other one is about lowering inequities. There are many divides, geographic divides, social divides, and the question is, what's the role of AI and what's the role of education and the role of AI in education in helping us confront those divides? And from your perspectives, do you have any ethical considerations about that question, about what AI will do in terms of the equity around the globe and those situations. We can start. We can go however you want, but if you want to go around the circle again, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Great and difficult question. We're now working in a project in order to bring responsible AI not to bring because it already exists, but to push the concept of responsible AI in Latin America and Caribbean. And of course, we treat it in different standpoints. One is to increase the competitivity of competitiveness, of small companies and things like this. But then there are three elements that we're starting to look in detail, and probably you know lots about this, but just to share. One is the vulnerable population, both in terms of economy and in terms of exclusion. Of course, there's another important thing and critical, which is gender, and then this is thing of sustainability. And what we're trying to do, and we're starting, so it's just kind of an initial work, is to try to understand how this is done, because the difficulty of this specific project is that it's not a very tactical project; it's a strategic project. So on the one hand, we have to bring responsible AI to the region, or to work with the existing local agents already there, in order to kind of bring the, let's say, experience that we're having with the AI Act and all the things that are happening here in Europe, but at the same time, without having specific projects that can bias us to the specific things. But I think those are the three elements that we've recognized as critical, or the most critical that we've seen, at least in that area, in order to work on the role of AI. And that is affected by education. Okay, so how can we first use, how can we educate in AI, but how can we use AI in that education in order to scale as much as possible?
Yes.
And that brings us again to the concept of bias and the concept of, how do we do there? So for example, I don't know you know, but for example, the Spanish government just announced a couple of weeks ago that they are going to have relationships with different companies and different institutions in order to build the Spanish and other co-official languages in Spain and Latin America language model. Okay, for us that brings us questions about whether that's the best way to bring the new AI to the region, or is much better, and that's a question of whether a government like this should just focus on the data, to have real quality data, unbiased data, as much unbiased as possible, in order to leave companies to bring LLMs or other models to the region. So I don't have the answer right now, but basically those are the areas that we believe are going to be critical in the following years.
That's interesting. So you brought in, we've had one type of bias, and that's the owner of the technology and the way you brought in a couple of biases. One is the biased data, and then the other is the biased model, all of which can distort educational outcomes, et cetera. And then the regulators can focus on the models, or just and to create in themselves, or just getting the best unbiased data set, if there is such a thing, and make that available to the private sector. Interesting.
Which brings, if I may add just one thing,
Sure.
that it is a cultural bias. I mean,
Yes.
trying to bring a single model that works for every single country, in this case Latin America, doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
Each has a different approach to knowledge, to understanding, to learning, which brings also additional issues.
Yes. Okay. You want to take a shot at the role of education, AI, in global inequities? And
Yes, definitely. I think AI now is starting to give us ideas about how to approach education in a very different way. And I think we all experienced that when we started dealing with ChatGPT, in a question-answer kind of chat education experience, and how that's very different from reading a book. When you're reading a book, everything is linear. The author already organized the topics for you. Here, when you're chatting the system, you ask question, get answer that invoke your curiosity to ask another question. So it opened a door for problem-solving oriented, curiosity-based learning, which is a fundamental way of doing learning. If you look at 1,000 years ago and how learning was done, it was like that. It was not curriculum-based learning that we have established in the last 200 years. It was mainly problem-solving, curiosity-based learning. And now AI will enable that, and in a global and scalable way. So now comes many questions in terms of how educational institutions, which have been really focused on curriculum-based, mass certificate-given institution, will transform in terms of these new ways of new and old ways of learning, and what the role of AI in this institution, and what's the role of AI in education outside this institution. But also comes all the question about AI hallucination. If the data or the outcome that AI give you is really correct or not? What are the sources this coming from? All these are unsolved problems in terms of AI at this point, and that limits its use of education. But there are many other issues as well. We mentioned the biases here, which I hear a lot about talking about bias in AI. However, we don't really confess that the issue of bias exists in our education system and culture system way before AI. I mean, who decide which textbook we are using and what's go inside that textbook to start with. I mean, that has nothing to do with AI. That is one big issue. Also, I can talk about in details, but this is one of the fundamental issues.
Yes, I think you're right. I think we're recognizing that even outside of AI, there's implicit and bias and structural inequities built into many things that we ignored previously, that are becoming very poignant as the technology can exacerbate those. Yeah,
Totally.
and that's interesting. So you made the statement that previously education was more of an exchange, questions and answers between Socrates and his students in Greece or something, or today it's limited to elite schools where you can have a tutor that you have your conversation with, but you're arguing that the AI can then reinvigorate and make that available globally, that same kind of dialogic approach to education.
Yes. Totally.
Interesting. Do you know of any organizations that are already practicing that, or is that just something?
No, I try to practice that in my classes. When ChatGPT came around, and I'm teaching AI for undergrad course, I was supposed to teach about these kind of things. So my first assignment to them is that use ChatGPT and try to ask questions and that they cannot answer or push to the limits.
Yes.
So that was very nice experience because students had to really figure out what kind of question they ask and keep pushing and figure out what is the limitation of these systems.
Yeah.
And again, this semester I was teaching a course about computer vision, and ChatGPT came with another version where you can now put an image and answer questions. So since that's the core of my course, I challenge them also to see what are the limits of this system, put an image, start to ask questions, and see what kind of answer they're giving and what kind of images they cannot answer or cannot infer about. So I find it fascinating to use this kind of tools in classrooms, but I don't have a clear idea about how this can be a part of a systematic way of learning. I know, for example, in the last few years, people have introduced other technologies like YouTube, and have this inverted classroom kind of concepts.
Yes.
But now, how that's evolved now with AI, because again, when you look at YouTube learning, I mean, everything's in YouTube, right? Lots of lecture about anything. But again, it's linear system. You basically, it's like the same as reading a book, except they have many choices.
Yes.
So AI is totally different from that. But for a student who doesn't know what to look for, that's becoming a problem. And that's the role of universities or schools when you put a curriculum and lineup of topics and things like that. And that's the dilemma. How can we bridge these two things, these two paradigms of teaching?
Yes. No. I'm just thinking about how I might go back to myself to the class and say that, I don't know, we're going to learn about the Spanish Civil War or the Arte Velázquez, and then you put students in groups and they ask questions in AI and they try to compile some kind of understanding, and then the professor orchestrates some kind of overall integration of what they discovered. I can imagine all kinds of experiments and models along that line.
If I may add,
Please.
probably some of you already know it, but I think it's interesting. I come from the publishing industry, and that's a topic of discussion for at least the last 15 years, which is the Gutenberg parenthesis. This idea that
Sorry, the Gutenberg parenthesis. Okay.
Yeah, the basic idea is that the way we learn, the way we understand, the way we model our world was changed like 500 years ago when the printed machine came.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, we learned in many different ways, in totally different ways, and it seems that the parenthesis is, what part of the theory is that it's being closed now.
Yes.
With different technologies. And now with AI, and I think it's related to what you were saying, is kind of this new way of maybe going back in one side of this Q&A and discussions, and but on the other way, taking advantage of the technology that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
And is there are papers that show that, we model our brain in terms of how we learn to read and write, and this may change in the future. So I find it really fascinating how we may be entering maybe in a different world in the future.
Yeah, a little bit of Back to the Future or something along those lines.
I don't know if I share your perspective that students are going to be sitting there with AI really engaged for any kind of significant amount of time. Maybe we're really bad at predicting how technology plays out, so it's just really a wondering for me. But I wonder if in 10 years we'll be looking back at this moment and saying, how did we think that was going to change fundamentally the way that students learn about things that they don't necessarily love, right? There's some topics that students don't love, and the reasons why they end up learning those things is because they have a loving relationship with their teacher and with the people around them. Many years ago, when I was running my organization for refugee youth, one of the biggest challenges that we had was the SAT test to get into college. And it felt very unfair because all the studies show that test scores are really closely related, you probably know this, to income. And that's like the biggest indicator of success on the test. And that's because a lot of these kids have private tutors. And so here comes the College Board, the organization that creates the SAT, and they partner up with Khan Academy. And they had this big promise to the world that we're going to change the whole dynamic of this inequity, and all of these kids are going to be able to have their own private tutor on this Khan Academy thing, and it's using AI in different kind of ways, a little bit more instructivist, which is like answer a question, get another question based on that, and ChatGPT is a little bit different from that. But what they ended up finding out, and they learned pretty quickly, is that students from low-income backgrounds don't want to sit around on a computer and just talk with it all day. And I saw this firsthand in my academy. It was like pulling teeth, for the lack of a better analogy, with our kids. They just didn't want to do it. And so then you wonder, why are the wealthy kids, why are they doing well? It's because they're being encouraged by these tutors. They have these relationships. It's the social enterprise of learning that is there. And so I think that that's one challenge that's there. And Khan Academy is continuing to make all these promises. There's I think it's called Khanmigo. Mm-hmm. If you go on the website, another Google search, if you go on their website, you'll see things like have your own tutor, have your own pilot. And it's actually not that. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous and dishonest, because it's, again, I think, following the playbook of what the College Board did on the SAT test, because it's not going to be like having a tutor. And I think that we need to be realistic about what that means. But one other thing that's coming to mind about possible challenges, is everyone familiar with the term hallucination? And here, I think we're starting to learn that word. It's basically when ChatGPT just makes something up. And sometimes they're really wild. I was just doing a quick search on my phone yesterday. I think if you have an Android, WhatsApp has that function there. So I've been playing with it a lot. And I just asked it, what did the Harvard president say about the divestment movement for South Africa in the 1980s? And it said something completely wild, that the president compared them to the Ku Klux Klan. I said, I knew that wasn't true, because I've been in this divestment movement for a long time, and I've never heard that. That wasn't true. And so then I guess you wonder why are these hallucinations happening. If you're someone who's learning code and it gives you a false code and you're a novice, you're not going to know that it's not true. If you know what you're doing, you know this is not right. It even does basic arithmetic wrong. as well.
Yes.
And I've experienced that when I was trying to use that to kind of surpass certain cognition that I was not interested in doing. And so I think these are some of the issues that we have. And so well-resourced schools are going to have a lot more time to teach young people about how to discern, how to make decisions about these, how to, do what we call prompt engineering. And students at schools that are less funded, that have less ability to do that kind of guidance, those students are going to be, the object of these technologies in ways that we cannot predict. And so that's some of the things that I'm thinking about right now that feel a little bit precarious, I think.
No, that's very good. So we'll open it up to some questions to the audience. So be thinking if you have a question. So yes, you've again nailed again. There exist these biases and inequities in the educational system without AI, right? And I experienced it when I went to California public school, and I remember being at my friend's house, and their friend's father would come in and say, "You guys should be studying. The smart kids are studying right now." And then I moved my kids to the greater Washington, D.C. area, where there's the highest concentration of advanced degrees. Everyone there works for the World Bank, and they have a PhD. So, of course, that has an influence on the kids. And so my problem was that my kids wouldn't study, is they wouldn't stop studying because of all of their friends were studying. Completely, I had to go upstairs and say, "Stop studying, come down and watch Game of Thrones with me."
Yeah. Come play,
well,
have
yeah,
fun.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it speaks exactly to that. It wasn't intellectual capability or potential. It was the environment in which they found themselves, and that environment motivated them by their peers and by the system to be excel in education in ways that in my environment we weren't encouraged to do.
It's what Noam Chomsky calls the luxury of leisure.
Yes.
Right. That money that provides those opportunities to happen.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then the question then, again, AI, we've heard some possibilities that it will minimize or lower these barriers, because one of the things about the technology, unlike, say, an automobile or something, is if you can get access to the internet, which is not universal yet, but you can have access then to these models. So in that sense, it could democratize access in a way other technologies in the past haven't. But then again, how they're used, the environment in which they're used is consequential.
Yeah, I think we'll find with AI what we found in many other technologies, right? I think 10 years ago when MOOCs came out, those massive online courses, they said this is going to democratize learning, and I don't really think that it did. And so there's a lot of these kind of platitudes that are happening right now, and yeah, I lost the plot in my thinking,
That's
but we'll
all
come
right.
back to it.
Well, we're traveling a lot, a
Through
very
time and
broad.
space.
So, does anyone have any questions? Yes, go right ahead.
So I don't have a microphone, but I'll speak loud. Just to propel a little bit the controversy. So I get your point regarding Khan Academy or the usage of virtual assistants to support or personalized learning. Now, I think it's also important to keep in the radar that we are at the very early stages. I do believe, honestly, that in a few years, every student is going to have a sidekick. Because the deeper you go into not only the areas of opportunity from an academic perspective for a particular student, but also how the student learns, I think at that point, maybe I'm living in utopia, but I truly think that we're about to live the biggest disruption education has ever seen. And the driver is going to be virtual assistants that are going to know you deeply. So I guess kind of I just wanted to stimulate the controversy.
Sure.
I believe there are going to be other ethical aspects that we'll be discussing in a few years. So today we're talking maybe about can we use, from a privacy perspective, the data to truly know how you learn? I think that's going to be the controversy. But that's going to change. What we consider privacy, the kids that are studying today, it's a different concept of privacy. So that's number one. And when we're talking about the future, maybe what we'll see, and there's a book called AI 2041, I don't know if anyone has seen it. There's one chapter on education. And there are issues like how deeply personally involved the student could get with these virtual assistants. Because they're going to become their friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, the person that you tell your secrets to.
Yeah.
So, and that's a different, I think it's a way deeper ethical implication to what we're discussing today. Just wanted to put a little bit of
Okay, so for the people that couldn't hear, the question was broad, but was the idea of personalization in education through the virtual assistants or AI agents, and that opens up opportunities that similar to what we've discussed, but there was also then ethical questions around the information needed to personalize that. There's questions of privacy around that, and then also questions about what kind of relationships students are going to create with these virtual assistants and what the implications of that. So as if we didn't have enough ethical concerns to discuss, let's toss that out to our panel.
If I may answer one of your comments, I found it really interesting. Using these systems that you mentioned is going to force us to be very critical with how we understand those systems themselves. So let me put you a very simple example. One of the companies I built in 2018 did use AI and statistics to understand how people read, how people were reading books and listening to audiobooks and things like this. So we had these models and these things. One of the things we always had to explain to our customers, and in order for them to put into the privacy policy, is that nobody understood, and maybe now this is obvious, but I can tell you in 2018 it wasn't obvious, is that if I know what you read, I'm going to understand your sexual preferences, your religious beliefs. I'm going to understand so much about you, and it wasn't taken as personal information. So for some of our customers, I wouldn't say many, but some customers were like, well, we're just seeing how people read books. No. Even by knowing where you stop reading, I can infer what are your interests. And this was just a very small boutique company for very small, very, very specific education-related stuff. What we can have now in terms of, and this is one of my fears, is when you have a huge model that is going to be used as the operating system for access or for many people to access that information, any small mistake there, any small caveat there can affect lots of people, and I think that's gonna be one of the challenges there that you and I are gonna have in the near future.
So that's very interesting. And already now, it's Amazon supposedly, with their data about your purchasing, they can predict things like women's fertility, or they can even predict the way you will behave, even though you don't believe you behave that way, right? So we're coming to the end here. We have about 5 more minutes, so let's just follow this line, and either one of you, if you want to take a shot at that question about the virtual agents.
Nothing else to say on that, yeah.
I want to follow up on that. I mean, obviously there's no answer for this open question. I just want to take this into the next level, which is the role of technology have been in the last, since invention of the brands to the invention of the internet to now AI, is giving access to knowledge, right? That's basically it. So 30 years ago, if you are living in a third world country, you don't have access to knowledge other than what's a local library. The internet allow us to have access, so it's opportunity, and AI will allow more access. And that leads us to the fundamental question of what is education? When you go to school, what are you looking for? If you have global access to knowledge, why are you going to school? And that go back to your point, which is basically about the SAT exam. It's really about motivation and coaching and teaching students who doesn't want to learn, basically, who doesn't see the motivation why you learn. So that's why they go to school, and we kind of push them to do that. And this fundamental thing that AI cannot solve. Not the problem of AI. I mean, it's a problem of how we motivate kids to learn, or even ourselves to learn, basically.
Yeah, really? Because that's going to change.
Maybe, I don't know. I think for persons who are motivated, AI will be a great opportunity because it gives them access to global knowledge. But for kids who are not motivated enough, it's our job as educators to give them these skills, to how to motivate them and how to teach them how to be perseverance and how to do critical thinking. These are the basic things that we need to teach our kids because the knowledge is already now accessible and they can get answers themselves. So I think AI will help us really understand the role of education altogether in the future.
Can I give a counter example really fast?
Yeah, so we might be at the end here.
So I've seen examples of AI being used for autistic kids to motivate them very specifically.
Amazing.
And they are successful.
Yeah.
And there is a lack of access to institutions for special kids. This is a very specific use case. Maybe that is gonna.
Yes, amazing.
I agree with you 100%. Is the role of the teacher has to keep evolving into this coaching, supporting, and so on.
Okay, well, and that it comes back to the much of the ethical questions here is that we don't know how people are going to use the technology. We don't know necessarily what the technology will do. We are still at the very beginning. And one thing about technology, especially digital technologies, they are commercialized, they are ubiquitous in society, and we only find out the unintended consequences, the ethical and moral considerations, often after the fact, after they're already ubiquitous. So this will be a conversation that will continue here in this forum and in the world going forward. I'd like to thank all of the panelists and everyone who attended this session. And I believe, is it break time or is it? Okay, and we have a break. And if you have questions for the panelists, I guess they'll stick around. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
You did a really great job.
Really appreciate you. It makes a big difference when the facilitator does a really good job. I appreciate how you did that.
I will take that to heart. Thank you.
Yeah, that was really good.
It was interesting. You guys are, I don't know how they decided to put everybody
I have no
together.
idea.
But it was,
I think AI decided.
that's it, yeah.
Because they said that they decided all the topics. So maybe they did that as well?
We got the overlord staring
I
at
know, it's a bit weird. I'm in in San Diego. San Diego.
I used to live there. I grew up in San Francisco.
Yeah, man.
I
Yeah.
lived in San Diego for a long time.
Right now you're in
I'm in DC.
DC, yeah. Not a bad place to be.
No, that's what I said. If I'm going to be on the East Coast, I think DC's the place. Maybe
Yeah.
New York, but I've lived in Boston, too cold.
I hear you. I hear you. Man, that was great, my brother. I appreciate you, man.